The children were now afraid that Jardice would have something to say to them about what had happened in the wood. As it turned out, however, she never mentioned it either then or afterwards. I think, and Diggory thinks too, that her mind was of a sort which cannot remember that quiet place at all. And however often you took her there, and however long you left her there, she would still know nothing about it. Now that she was left alone with the children, she took no notice of either of them, and that was like her too. In Charn, she'd taken no notice of Polly, till at the very end, because Diggory was the one she wanted to make use of. Now that she had Uncle Andrew, she took no notice of Diggory. I expect most witches are like that. They're not interested in things or people unless they can use them. They are terribly practical. So there was silence in the room for a minute or two, but you could tell by the way Jardice was tapping her foot on the floor that she was growing impatient. Presently she said to herself, "What is the old fool doing? I should have bought a whip." Then she stalked out of the room in pursuit of Uncle Andrew, without one glance at the children. "Phew," said Polly, letting out a long breath of relief. "And now I must get home. It's frightfully late. I shall catch it." "Well, do come back as soon as you can," said Diggory. "This is simply ghastly having her here. We must make some sort of plan." "That's up to your uncle now," said Polly. "It was he who started all this messing about with magic." "All the same, you will come back, won't you? Hang it all, you can't leave me alone in a scrape like this." "I shall go home by the tunnel," said Polly rather coldly. "That'll be the quickest way. And if you want me to come back, hadn't you better say you're sorry?" Sorry?" exclaimed Diggory. "Well now, if that isn't just like a girl. What have I done?" "Oh, nothing, of course," said Polly sarcastically. "Only nearly screwed off my wrist in that room with all the waxworks like a cowardly bully. Only struck the bell with the hammer like a silly idiot. Only turned back in the woods so she had time to catch hold of you before we jumped into our own pool. That's all." "Oh," said Diggory, very surprised. "Well, all right, I'll say I'm sorry. And I am really sorry about what happened in the waxworks room. There, I've said I'm sorry, and now do be decent and come back. I'll be in a frightful hole if you don't." "I don't see what's going to happen to you. It's Mr. Ketterley who's going to have to sit on red-hot chairs and have ice in his bed, isn't it?" "Oh, it isn't that sort of thing," said Diggory. "What I'm bothered about is Mother. Suppose that creature went into her room. She might frighten her to death." "Oh, I see," said Polly in a rather different voice. "All right, we'll call it Pax. I'll come back if I can, but I must go now." And she crawled through the little door into the tunnel, and that dark place among the rafters, which had seemed so exciting and adventurous a few hours ago, now seemed quite tame and homely. We must go back to Uncle Andrew. His poor old heart went pitter-pat as he staggered down the attic stairs, and he kept on dabbing at his forehead with his handkerchief. When he reached his bedroom, which was the floor below, he locked himself in. And the very first thing he did was to grope in his wardrobe for a bottle and a wine glass, which he always kept hidden there where Aunt Letty could not find them. He poured himself out a glassful of some nasty grown-up drink and drank it off in one gulp. Then he drew a deep breath. "Upon my word," he said to himself, "I'm dreadfully shaken. Most upsetting at my time of life." He poured out a second glass and drank it too. Then he began to change his clothes. You have never seen such clothes, but I can remember them. He put on a very high, shiny, stiff collar of the sort that make you hold your chin up all the time. He put on a white waistcoat with a pattern on it and arranged his gold watch chain across the front. He put on his best frock coat, the one he kept for weddings and funerals. He got out his best tall hat and polished it up. There was a vase of flowers put there by Aunt Letty on his dressing table. He took one and put it in his buttonhole. He took out a clean handkerchief, a lovely one, such as you couldn't buy today. Out of the little left-hand drawer, he put a few drops of scent on it. He took his eyeglass with a thick black ribbon and screwed it into his eye, and then he looked at himself in the mirror. Children have one kind of silliness, as you know, and grown-ups have another kind. At this moment, Uncle Andrew was beginning to be silly in a very grown-up way. Now that the witch was no longer in the same room with him, he was quickly forgetting how she had frightened him, and thinking more and more of her wonderful beauty. He kept on saying to himself, "A dem fine woman, sir, a dem fine woman. Superb creature." He'd also somehow managed to forget it was the children who had got hold of this superb creature. He felt as if he himself, by his magic, had called her out of unknown worlds. "Andrew, my boy," he said to himself as he looked in the glass, "you're a devilishly well-preserved fellow for your age, a distinguished-looking man, sir." You see, the foolish old man was actually beginning to imagine the witch would fall in love with him. The 2 drinks probably had something to do with it, and so had his best clothes. But he was, in any case, as vain as a peacock. That's why he'd become a magician. He unlocked the door and went downstairs, sent the housemaid out to fetch a hansom. Everyone had lots of servants in those days. And looked into the drawing room. There, as he expected, he found Aunt Letty. She was busily mending a mattress. It lay on the floor near the window, and she was kneeling on it. "Letitia, my dear," said Uncle Andrew, "I have to go out. Just lend me £5 or so, there's a good gel." Gel was the way he pronounced girl. "No, Andrew dear," said Aunt Letty in her firm, quiet voice without looking up from her work. "I've told you times without number that I will not lend you money." "Now, pray don't be troublesome, my dear Gell," said Uncle Andrew. "It's most important. You'll put me in a deucedly awkward position if you don't." "Andrew," said Aunt Letty, looking at him straight in the face, "I wonder you are not ashamed to ask me for money." There was a long, dull story of a grown-up kind behind these words. All you need know about it was that Uncle Andrew, what with managing dear Letty's business matters for her, and never doing any work, and running up large bills for brandy and cigars, which Aunt Letty had paid again and again, had made her a good deal poorer than she had been 30 years ago. "My dear girl," said Uncle Andrew, "you don't understand. I shall have some quite unexpected expenses today. I have to do a little entertaining. Come now, don't be tiresome." "And who, pray, are you going to entertain, Andrew?" asked Aunt Letty. A most distinguished visitor has just arrived." "Distinguished? Fiddlesticks," said Aunt Letty. "There hasn't been a ring at the bell for the last hour." At that moment, the door was suddenly flung open. Aunt Letty looked round and saw with an amazement that an enormous woman, splendidly dressed, with bare arms and flashing eyes, stood in the doorway. It was the witch.